Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Now, if I'm going to sound a little bit strange during this EVE Talk, it's that because I am fighting the tail end of the flu. So I caught the flu like mid last week and it completely took me out from Wednesday to Friday. Now I'm feeling a lot better. I'm taking everything that I need to fight against it, and I still have to pace myself, so I do feel up to doing an EVE Talk. Maybe I'll keep it a little bit shorter, but yeah, it's still definitely not completely out of my system yet. Of course, there is some interesting news in EVE Online as well. There is a dev blog on the new changes to the structures that are coming. Moon mining coming to 0.5 systems in February as well. So I do need to do a little bit more work to get everything up and running there. A little bit faster than I thought it would be. I thought maybe they'd do it for March or something like that. But that's good news, of course, especially because there are some moon materials that are coming there as well for Tech 2. So it's gonna be great. I do look forward to doing all of that stuff. And there's been a bit of some war drums beating in Nullsec as well. I think with the Imperium making a move on the Keepstar from Horde, or at least doing some conflict around there. And you may already be able to see or have seen on the ticker that that has made a difference when it comes to the minerals. But as always, we are going to start with some plex and stuff, and that is going to be at 140. Like that, and plex are basically moving sideways. Let's take out the local filter so that we can also see what's happening in the trade hubs. But it's 3,223,000 ISK for a plex at the moment. That's on the sellers, and you can see the best sellers actually in Cheetah Station. That's been a very long time since we're seeing that, but he's definitely like pretty lonely sell order. After that, they jumped pretty quickly to 3.3 million. And the buyers at almost 3.2 million as well. Very narrow margin, and we can see on the chart here basically flat plex prices here. So not much to say. It's a bit of a wait and see. I think that everybody is like me, eagerly awaiting as to the roadmap for 2018 when it comes to EVE Online from CCP. So we know that of course there is the new structure rebalance, but we now also know that that's going to come to CC very quickly, and that they're planning to deploy that in February. After that, it's not that long until FanFest anymore, so then we should really start to see and get some news about what their plans are for 2018. And I personally can't wait, but I think that there's a lot of other people that are doing the exact same thing, waiting on that to decide, well, what do I think is going to happen with plex and with the game in general in the upcoming year. Could be interesting. The multiple pilot training certificates, know some movements, but I think that's normal considering the variations in volumes that are here. It's not a great market just yet, but it's definitely come back a little bit. Used to be like less than 20 that would move on a single day. That has changed quite a bit here, but now we are decreasing our volatility and we're basically settling around 1.3 billion ISK, almost 1.4 for the sellers, and then less than 1.3 for the buyers. More than 100 million in margin here. That's surprising, but that's actually diminishing if you look at the peaks and the bottoms that keep getting smaller and smaller in difference. Very interesting to see what's happening here, but basically settling at a price that's cheaper than 30 days plex time, which is normal as well. Let's move on to the extractors next. We haven't seen the impact just yet, but let's take a quick look on the chart here. Flat at 360 million ISK, but I just received an email that there's actually a sale on skill extractors, 15% off until January 22nd. So we'll see if that already has an impact. Let's remember 360 million on average. So here still 362 for the sellers, 359 for the buyers. That's right on the money. We do see though, look at that. Look at that, all of this in the last 24 hours. That's quite a lot of fresh sellers, 2 full pages. I think that is the first people that notice the sale, trying to still get the best possible price out of those cheaper skill extractors, bringing them to the market. very carefully, in fact, just with ones, which makes it quite interesting. I think they don't want to completely flood the market with the cheap skill extractors just yet, but at some point this will have some consequences, of course, as more and more people notice the cheap skill extractors from the sale. I do expect a little bit of a dip for that, but maybe not by too much. It's 15% off, so that should give us an indication. On the skill injector front, let's start with the large skill injectors. Slowly up in price, but basically flat at the tail end, staying well above 800 million though. We are talking 816 million for the sellers and 805 million for the buyers. Narrow margin, just like with plex here, and yeah, starting to flatten out, but at a high point as well for the year. Is this the same for plex? No, not exactly at a high point, actually a little bit lower than the 2 year high points that one reached. So definitely a nice time for the large skill injectors if you've managed to invest those about a year ago and you do want to liquidate some ISK. I wouldn't blame you for doing that, to be honest. Next up, we've got the small skill injectors. Also slowly going up in price still, so not doing too badly, starting at around 150 million when they were first introduced. Currently going for a bit more than 170, 100, oh, well actually no, 167 million ISK for the sellers, 161 for the buyers, and the chart is, yeah, doing a little bit weird. I think that just may be a chart problem here. This may actually be 165 or something like that. Certainly looks like it from the price, unless everything here is within the last 24 hours. No, you still have, well, maybe. No, you don't. Some of these older orders are older at this price range. So, okay, a little bit strange that it says more than 170 on the chart when it's not. But yeah, the small skill injectors still very much in price, and if the chart direction is correct, which I think it is, it's also slightly up, just like the large skill injectors, which makes sense. And then finally we have the daily alpha injector, still a very bad chart because it's such a new item, but it's basically flat around 60 million, a little bit below that at the moment, edging upwards on the 5-day moving average. 61 million for the sellers, 53 million for the buyers. That's still a healthy margin there. That's quite surprising. At some point I expect all of that to close down though. Just because as long as plex isn't going anywhere, those margins are closing. I think all the others will follow suit pretty soon. Moving on to some minerals at 740. If I'm sniffling a little bit, you know why that is. But here we go, titanium. That is quite nice, right? Heading straight to the 5.5 ISK mark. Increased volumes, yeah, a little bit right here. Since basically I think deployment of the Imperium, this must have been a bit of a rush towards more titanium, maybe to replace ships. In the meantime, I did take the price itself. You can see that basically we lack lots of supply here at the moment in GTA itself. 598 for the first seller. If we go to the player-owned trade hubs, it's difficult to see here, but in perimeter you still have like 580 in play, and some people are selling at 525 as well. But usually we go with this filter, and so here you can see that there is definitely a bit less, either a lack of supply or extremely strong demand all of a sudden, that has increased the price of titanium quite nicely. I would say, you know, close to 6 ISK on the sell side here. If you want a chance to really get rid of your titanium reserves, this might be the right time to do so. We don't really know how long the war in Nullsec is going to keep up for, which actually might create a better opportunity above 6 ISK, who knows. But right now, nice upswing on titanium. Let's see what pyrite's been doing. Slight upswing as well, but definitely no breakout like with titanium here. So that is still basically, I think, so oversupplied that even this blip from the war has no impact on pyrite. So it's still selling for 5 ISK here. In the station, buyers are coming in at 464, well below the titanium price at this point. Quite unnatural, but just look at the supply here. Still very healthy, hundreds of millions here, to together here as well. More hundreds of millions. They will start to come at 540 in the billions of units that are still available on the market. Just going to take a lot of time and a really major war to turn that around at the moment. Mexalon might be up though, as expected. It was already going back up before this announcement, up to like 70 ISK, but now look at that, we even have a data point at more than 80 ISK for Mexalon. Here 75 just a couple of days ago, so excuse me. There we go. Hope that wasn't too loud. 88.3 for the sellers, 74 for the buyers. The big winner here so far, I would say, for the Isaac Minerals. Definitely your focus, but selling in JITA for almost 90 ISK. That is a really great price for Mexalon. I think if we look, yeah, it's above the entire chart. 1 year high sell price in JITA itself. If I take out the filter, one jump out, we're at 84.5. In the player-owned trade hubs in perimeter, but definitely very, very nice price. And the impact of nullsec activity seen right here in the mineral markets. Very cool. One thing I would say is, you know, you might expect, well, this is then going to, of course, have its impact on Tech 1 ships. Keep in mind that I've been saying it as well, industrialists do make up some demand for minerals by grabbing reserves, creating cheap mineral reserves, and so there is a little bit of inertia there. We basically need the nullsec war to keep going. Hopefully the structure changes will actually mean that there is more structure related content, more conflict in nullsec, but we don't really know just yet. I've seen comments going on both sides. Some people, yeah, this looks good, and other people still seeing quite major problems with the fact that basically they're becoming even more powerful when actively used. So it's gonna be quite interesting, but right now for the minerals, definitely up in price, but we need patience. We need this to last. We need this then to translate to also the isogen market and the pyrite market, so it is a sustained increase in price across the board before we'll actually see an impact on Tech 1 ships, I think. So isogen, yeah, that's quite a surprise actually, despite what was happening here in Mexalon and Tritanium, which is really quite massive. We're just dipping to a 1 year low here. Less than 40 ISK for the sellers and still 110 million units coming in here. 39 ISK for the buyers. 1 year low for isogen. This is just a crazy, just a position. I think it's called isogen lower than Mexalon at a 1 year low point. Mexalon higher than isogen, which is completely crazy in the volumes you get from minerals, from the ores normally. And at a 1 year high point at more than 80 ISK. That's completely crazy. So yeah, definitely if you're mining, focus on Mexalon, focus on Tritanium at the moment. You're getting a much better price for that. And isogen and pyrite, I think, unfortunately, will need a hell of a lot of patience. Let's see what Noxium is doing. Slight tick up, not really a breakthrough. Are we at 350 at this point? 340 for the sellers, 328 for the buyers. It's always been that in between one. Noxium could move up on like a slight sustain, I think, in nullsec conflict. But at the moment, it's just going back to its average and like basically it could go either way, right? If everything stops in nullsec, they go back to mining and supplying. Then we'll go back down and it'll be in the same boat as pyrite and isogen. But if the conflict lasts, I think that Noxium will be the first one to break out, and then if the conflict lasts really a long time, perhaps pyrite and isogen could start to have an impact as well. The bad news, I would say, for sustained conflict is how you would expect to also see an impact on the nullsec minerals, but Zydrine is continuing its slow descent. Less than 800 ISK now, 799 for the sellers, 748 for the buyers. 1 year low point and no inflection just yet. So here, just like with Noxium, I would expect Zydrine and Megasite to also start to show an increase in price if the conflict is really starting to disrupt things in nullsec, which at the moment doesn't seem to be. So Megasite still well below 1000 ISK as well. 970 for the sellers, 932 for the buyers. And then finally we've got Morphite. That is basically holding on at a price for less than 10,000 ISK. A little bit like flat, I would say. 9,600 for the sellers and 9,600 for the buyers. Lack of margin, pretty obvious there. So it's a pretty interesting week here, I think, for minerals. And if you have titanium and Mexalon stocks, you can definitely look to unload some of that and try to make some ISK there. Next up, we've got our PI that's going to be at 1440. There we go. We're gonna go over this one quickly, trying to look for a trend. The broadcast nodes, that is interesting, dipping to 2 million, really. Sellers coming in at 2.1, buyers at 2 million. Mostly apparently some buyers winning out here with prices close to 2 million on average. So we're back in the normal trade range, and in fact at the moment it looks like we're actually trading at the lower end of that range for the broadcast nodes, which makes it quite interesting. I mean, put up a couple of buy orders for 2 million, wait for hopefully CCP to announce something like the broadcast towers and the information towers for nullsec, which might have an impact on local. You know, that's been like a plan that's been floating around, never anything concrete, but normally we would expect another set of structures at some point in 2018. Yeah, this could be very interesting to look at an early investment in some broadcast nodes. Next up here, we've got the construction blocks actually taking off a little bit, going back above 12,000 ISK. Okay, very interesting. 13,100 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers, an increase in margin. Basically, the sellers going up in price here. Buyers staying probably around average, sellers a bit above average, so slight opportunity in construction blocks. Interesting to see the moves here for the last like 1.5 months. We've basically been flat on the averages for most of them. And so broadcast nodes a bit below, construction blocks a bit above. Consumer electronics, that did break out last week and actually maintains a higher than average price. 15,250 for the sellers, 14,300 for the buyers. Great time to try and sell some of those. The coolants, of course, the fuels are that one category that's not been doing too well. Maybe the structures 2.0 will slowly start to change that a little bit, because unfueled structures, so structures that don't have an active service slot that is consuming fuel, will now lose a timer on their defense. They'll just skip the armor timer. That will be a significant decrease in their defensibility, but I basically feel that at the moment most people think of especially the medium structures as just throwaway structures that cost less than $1 billion anyways, so that they won't bother changing their habits. If you're just plunking them down to annoy your opponents and you're not fueling them, you're still going to do that. And so I don't think that people expect this to really increase fuel demand all that much. And so coolants is staying at a 1-year low point, selling for 8,300 ISK, and buyers are at 8,115. So basically they found their bottom a bit above 8,000 ISK. Enriched uranium, same thing, fuel related, up a little bit in price. Basically, it's starting to make its market moves below the 10,000 ISK mark. Sellers 10,250, buyers 9,400, and that bottom here was 8,700. So yeah, no, actually maybe we'll start to move around the 10,000 ISK for enriched uranium. It's a bit trickier to make than coolants, for instance. Integrity response drones against the grain here, moving back up a little bit, but something to note, of course, before the introduction of the refineries we were on 2.5 million on average, and we did dip quite a bit below that. So we had a slight investment opportunity at 2.2 million. Now we're back slightly above average, but not by too much. 2.6 million for the sellers, 2.6 million for the buyers as well. A bit of a premium, but you know, this is just normal market forces, I think. Mechanical parts next, flat at less than 10,000 ISK. Again, fuel related, 10,000 for the sellers, 9,300 for the buyers. Nuclear reactors. Let's see here. We still see these median daily prices, right? 86k, and then all of a sudden 110,000 ISK. All over the place, quite interesting. Sellers 112,000, buyers 100,000. So it looks like the buyers are the ones that have given in on the nuclear reactors. We're slowly starting to edge to an average price above 110,000. The question is, will this continue? And will we start to see the volatility come back a little bit here? It's always been some quite jerky movement here, but decently low in in margin there. So it's going to be interesting to see for nuclear reactors. It is tied to structures. Keep that in mind. This big spike is a show of that. And so if you do see some of these low prices for less than 90,000 ISK, I would say that that could be an interesting investment as well. Robotics next. Oh, that's interesting. The first fuel-related PI material that is now going back up in price towards 100,000 ISK. Very nice. 100,000 for the sellers, 95,000 for the buyers. So we definitely had a nice prolonged buy opportunity at 90,000 ISK here about a month ago, and I actually bought some robotics during this time. Not too much, but I did think that maybe there was a slight opportunity, and so I've got some investments here that are paying off now. I think I'm going to have some patience and see if we can't go any higher, to be honest. Maybe at some point CCP will do something when it comes to the fuels. So I'm holding on to that basically until I know more about the plans for 2018. Self-harmonizing power cores, very flat, right in the average range from before the introduction of the refineries. 2.16 million for the sellers, 2.1 million for the buyers. Not much to say, maybe not the best opportunity, but if you absolutely want those investments already, I think you can start with this chart. Superconductors staying at 12k, basically on its average. 12,200 ISK for the sellers, 10,700 for the buyers. So the buyers a bit below average. They're trying to get a good deal there, but the sellers are on the normal price for superconductors. Test cultures next, slight tick up here, quite interesting on increased volumes after staying on 8,300 for a bit. Sellers 9,500, 8,300 for the buyers though. So this is, I think, entirely a speculative move. We don't have enough demand for test cultures. Here again, keep one thing in mind related to structures, and so if more structures are announced, buying at 8,300 is probably not a bad deal. And then we've got the wetware mainframes. Again, I would say maybe on the lower end of the average, but definitely in an affordable price range. 2.4 million for the sellers, 2.3 million for the buyers. It's a little bit tricky, I would say, for PI at the moment. I do have some fuel-related investments, and I think for robotics that it made a lot of sense, and so those are already starting to pay off. But for a lot of these, I would say that yeah, maybe the plans from CCP will be quite important when it comes to deciding on what to do. On the other hand, of course, all these advanced PI materials related to structures, if you do spot a good opportunity, I think it makes sense to go for them, because we know that even if CCP doesn't decide to go for more actual structures, it's very, very likely that Stargates themselves, which are of course the tail end of the roadmap that we know about, will be in the same vein as structures themselves, and thus that could actually be like one of those big opportunities to sell those at a bubble price like this. So keep it in mind, of course, if you see them go for like less than 2 million, I would say you definitely potentially have a great investment there for the longer term though. For the longer term, we don't know the roadmap just yet. Next up, Take One Chips here, 23 minutes. Like that. Gonna go over these pretty quickly, just try and spot if something strange is happening. But the apocalypse, nope, settling at 130 million here, very cheap still. And yeah, of course we cannot expect mineral price changes to show up here just yet. The Caracal staying very cheaply, a bit above 9 million for the sellers, I suspect 9.2 and 8.5 million for the buyers, but still very, very cheap, of course. Catalyst still doing okay. Selling for 1.5 million, basically a bit of a lack of availability. I think that you're still getting a decent margin on the Catalyst. You've been doing so since December here, since that spike up. Quite an interesting situation. I don't have an exact explanation, except that maybe, again, my theory, there is some prep for a burn cheetah happening. The Drake next, trying to come back from the arms race dip here. managing to do so quite okay. I think if you would continue this line here, that this is basically the decreased mineral price, so 41 million for 40 million on average for a Drake, you could say. Is very cheap, but that's to be expected with current minerals. Ferox, nothing special either, right? This is basically the mineral drop. Hurricane, same thing. Slightly bigger dip here due to the arms race, and just, yeah, well below average from the entire chart, but that's just normal in the current mineral trend. Megatron, arms race dip here again, trying to come back to 140, but still need some time to do so. And here again, you could end this parallel. Maybe we would have ended at around 140 just on the mineral price decrease. Oracle next, again, right, average 70 million before this, a little bit of a strange dip up here. August, yeah, maybe the war, right? I think that there was like a bit of a war here. And then a dip back down below the previous average on the lower minerals. Raven, actually the first battleship that I'm seeing here that is really coming back from the arms race event. That is quite interesting. So dipping as low as 120 million, selling now for 158 million. Not bad, back basically on the previous average here. Well done for the Raven. It's an incredible ship in my opinion, really a very nice one. Not on big volume, so basically the market is willing to pay this price for the Raven. The Retriever, interesting, very interesting sharp sharp increase in price here. Quite unexpected, was maintaining a price of around and below 20 million for quite a while. But once again, back up above that average here. 22 million for the sellers, 21 million for the buyers, so jump of 10% in a matter of a week, and quite sharp. So quite interesting here to see this Retriever being alive. I mean, you could have probably bought some of these for less than 19 million, and it's maybe a slight deal that you could have made there. Now the volumes aren't great, about 100 a day, but okay, quite interesting to see the Retriever make a bit of a comeback here. The Tempest still, right, this is basically again the mineral prices. Thrasher dropping off a bit on a massive volume, so I would say that this is pretty big supply, dropping the price to close to 1.1 million. It's 1.4 million, and it's like 3,000 of them being brought to the market all of a sudden. 1.4 million for the buyers though, so basically closing the margin with big volumes, but they need new producers to actually bring this price back down, or we could end up, this is going to be very interesting in my opinion in the upcoming weeks. Is there actual some preparation, some demand for massive amounts of Thrashers out there? Are we going to see this drop off sharply and then maybe bring the price back up towards a little bit higher, or is that not going to happen? That's quite interesting to see these two big sell orders here, putting that ceiling at 1.4 million, where the buyers were actually edging, the first buyers coming in there as well. So we'll see here. This might actually shed some light on what's happening in the destroyer market there. The Tornado is basically the mineral markets below its average. Tristan next, actually breaking out, quite interesting. Selling at the moment for 655,000 ISK, well above average. You could definitely make some money on producing some Tristans here at the moment, I would say. Venture dropping back to its normal average, and then the Vexor is also reeling from the lower mineral prices, well below average there, but a slight uptick, maybe trying to get back to 10 million, 9.8 million for the sellers here, but still extremely cheap. It's the name of the game. We need minerals to basically go up in price for a more sustained amount of time, which will mean sustained conflict in nullsec. Next up, Tech 2, 2820. There we go. Let's watch the trends here. So the Ares back up in price to 35 million. I did not expect that. One quick note, so with Moon mining coming to 0.5 in wormhole systems, and we now know that some of the low-end Moon materials will be found there as well. I think CCP is basically seeing that, yes, Tech 2 has that premium and the supplies aren't coming online just yet. They have all the metrics, of course, and that they think that some extra supply in the low-end stuff is not a bad idea. And so this could actually we'll have to see how much of that is actually being produced and created, but this could have an impact that might lower the prices of these ships. But here the Ares, against my expectation, back up to 34 million on the seller side of things, and so here we are definitely looking at an average new normal price that is quite a bit higher from before the refinery introduction. The Cerberus also jumping back up to 280 million ISK, to 79 for the sellers here. Again, I did not expect that. I would have thought that maybe we would start to see another step down to maybe 25 million, and that's where I would say, yeah, maybe here that being a new bottom price rather than 20 million would start to make sense for these frigates. But nope, it looks like below 30 million might be your buy opportunity. At least the Ares is showing that. The Claw, same thing here, right? A little bit of a dip below 30 million, but back up towards 35, selling for 34 million here. Very, very interesting situation that this is showing up on the second frigate. Next up here we get the Crow, same thing. If I can get the line to show up here, 30 million, we went below that, we went as low as 28 million, but here is the jump back up here and selling again for 32 million. It's not as high as the previous highs, which might still mean that another step down is possible, but it's not a uniform move across many of these frigates so far that we did again do a nice jump up after breaking 30 million for about a week or so. The Crusader is a little bit different, staying well below 30 million, 29 for the sellers, 26 for the buyers, so we could still go either way. The general trend is not entirely clear just yet. Heretic though, what the hell is that? That is very, very strange. So let's remember 75 million, and here this 5-day moving average is going stratospheric. Okay, trying to sell them for 200 million because lack of availability. There's basically no heretics on the market. Is there anything in the player markets? I'm curious. Yeah, 85. Nope, it's not in the player markets because it's too far away. Okay, well, if you have the means to make heretics, I would say please do so. The market is screaming for them. There's even some people willing to pay 190 million apparently for a heretic. Crazy. The Hound next. Also, we can see the jump up here up to 35 million is almost. Yeah. Look at that, lack of availability again is something that does come back. So here I would say that for the Hound, right, 29 million easy purchase, currently 37 million for the sellers. Yeah, I think that would have made you a little bit of ISK there on that trade. Quite interesting to see this happening. Ishtar next, also a jump up to 300 million here. Yep, 295 for the sellers. So it's definitely quite uniform across the Tech 2 market here. Manticore, same thing, but look at that, 31 million, so you could have probably bought some for 30 million, currently selling for 38.3 million, not bad, I would say. Nemesis next, same jump up. Let's also again look at this bottom average price, 25.5 million on one day, like right on the 1st of January, you could have bought some for 25.5 million and you're now selling them for 36 million. So look at that, is an opportunity. It's something definitely keep in mind here on the Tech 2 market, that this pattern has showed up for the first time and very clearly. Also, of course, keeping in mind now that CCP is introducing more supplies from 0.5 and wormhole space, but it's important to note here, we are trying to determine where the Tech 2 market is going. Pontifex here staying very pricey, above 75 million, 85 million in fact for the sellers. It's definitely something that's a little bit strange. It's one of these command destroyers, trickier to make. Some supplies coming online, but staying very, very expensive on the 1-year chart. Purifier, that's actually a very severe one. Low end 29 million, currently selling for 38 million. Very nice little trade opportunity here that has showed up. Now, one thing that I'm going to say at this point, of course, is that this is a pattern that has showed up quite often on nullsec activity, nullsec conflict. So this could actually have been the trigger, right? The market was settling down, everything was going nicely, and we were starting to see the step downs, but then the Imperium decided to make a move, and that's when we see this increase in price. So it could be that this is not normal market forces, but that is actually being triggered by a nullsec activity. And so if you're seeing like 30 million, okay, I'm gonna jump on that opportunity to buy some of these, know that it may take nullsec conflict for you to actually make the trade. That is something that I'm just realizing now. The Raptor next, that one is not moving all that much, selling for 34, buyers at 30 million. The Saber though, nice little jump up here once again, 70 million, and then jumping up to 76 million ISK, almost 10%, not so bad. The Stiletto, same pattern again, went to 30 million on average, currently selling for 35 million. Not that great of a trade, but definitely the same pattern once again. Stork pretty flat, but considering that it's at 90 million, that's quite normal. And then the Taranis, yeah, is staying below 30 million, so not that popular. Poor little Taranis. So yeah, Tech 2 market, quite interesting. The real question is, are we talking market forces on these jumps up, or are we talking nullsec deployment, nullsec conflict? That is something that is still yet to decide. And of course, longer term, CCP introducing more supplies, using potential new moon mining places as a bit of a means to tweak the markets. Very interesting, something that they might do later on as well. Who knows how it's gonna work. Tech 3 next, let's take a look at those guys. 3530. There we go. So here is the Confessor. Back below 50 million. Let's see here, 49 for the sellers, 41 for the buyers. I do think that we are starting to see on increased supplies, not so much. Well, availability is not bad for less than 50 million, coming in with 376 here, then 40, another 22, and a decent amount here. Yeah, I would say on increased availability, we are starting to decrease in volatility and finding a price range a bit below 50 million. Why am I saying this? This is, I think, the third week in a row where the Tengu is just showing up on the ticker here. It's not moving. 145 million, nothing. It moved absolutely nothing. So I think that things are stabilizing. And then the danger, I think, is that after a while we'll get into oversupply once again. So maybe if the nullsec conflict lasts long enough and there's actually some tactical destroyer fleets that get lost, this could be different. Excuse me. There we go. But for now, the trend, I think, is increased availability. Look at that, 193, 47, 73, 26, and increased stability in the Tech 3 market. The Jackdaw, I would expect the first one to make its move because it's super popular with the Imperium, and there is a slight tick up here, up to 54 million, 54 for the sellers, then 60 million. It's not by, yeah, it's definitely up in price. The Jackdaw is a very important nullsec ship at the moment, especially in the Imperium. They love the Jackdaw, so this will always be the first one to move on Imperium movements. And that would have been something that if I'd maybe not gotten sick, that I would have been able to make that investment, because you could have easily bought them, I think, for like 45 million, and so pretty soon you'll be selling them for 60 million. But the others aren't moving yet, which again is just like with the minerals, will need a prolonged conflict for it to start to show up in the others, I think. This Vapel here, as you can see here, flat on 50 million and 142, 165. It's that increased availability that is starting to show up. So let's take a look at the cruisers as well. Here is the Legion, basically flattening out also below 150, and look at that, 156, another 60 here. They're starting to come in at 145 with those big numbers, and then competition is starting here. The more comes in here, the more it's going to stabilize, and the more we are going to be threatened with oversupply again. The Loki, slight jump up to 200 million, but that's basically been, I think, a relisting. 363 of them. Here again, it's gonna start to probably stabilize at this range. And then the Proteus, you can clearly see the stabilization happening here on this chart. On 300 of them here, and then you get 21. Just look at the availability that keeps going up here. And then the Tengu, 145, flat, flat, flat for an entire month here, as I've said. 387, 131, those are those big numbers, that supply that is starting to flow around, that the market is yet to absorb. And then I would say we could go two ways. This can continue and then will slowly start to move back down in price on oversupply, or nullsec could know a bigger conflict, and then there could be interest, of course, as fleet get blown up and need to be replaced. So very interesting situation, and a tricky one to say, but if you do want to take a tech tree gamble, of course, the jackdaw at the lower end is always a good idea, and then the confessor at the moment, I would say, why the hell not? It's below 50 million, it's very popular, and potentially, if nullsec conflict lasts a little bit longer, there is going to be some confessor fleets in the mix, and that one could easily jump up to 60 million or more, as we can see here in the previous months. So why not? Next up, for the final part, I've chosen compressed ores because, well, with what was happening with Tritanium and with Mexalon, I definitely want to take a look at that. At 40 minutes, let's say. There we go. So the reason is, if the most efficient way for you to actually make ISK from your HiSec mining activity is actually going to be, I think, to compress it, bring it to a trade hub, and then hope that like a nullsec active entity needs it and picks that up. So let's take a look at it and see if we can indeed see a move on some of these. So we are going to focus on the HiSec ones. I'll change that. Compressed ores HiSec, because I don't think that there's much use in checking for compressed Arcanor here in Jita, because that's basically just some of the crazy just market seeding, and it really isn't all that interesting. But something like compressed Azure Plagioclase, which is definitely tied to Mexalon, could be interesting. Look at that bottom here, 6,400, currently going for 7,200. Sellers are in fact 7,500, up in price to this price range, above average once again. Definitely a pretty good time to mine for those, to make it and to bring it to the market. You can see that there is a premium now being paid for compressed Azure Plagioclase to bring Tritanium and Mexalon to nullsec. Next up, we've got, let's see, some compressed concentrated Veldspar. So here, if you look at this entire one-year chart, average maybe a little bit below 1,750. And currently selling for 2,100 almost. Look at that. That's a very nice little jump up to here on the chart. It actually has to yet catch up, but here again, compressed concentrated Veldspar, not bad, definitely above average at the moment. Compressed condensed core, that could be worse, because this is not just Tritanium but also Pyrite. Who the hell wants that at the moment? But look at that bottom, 2,000, so we can see that it's constantly been moving below average, and 2,000, but now selling almost for 3,000 ISK. Not bad. Compressed HiSec ores, guys. Definitely, I would say, if you're looking to turn your mining efforts into liquid ISK, I would compress rather than refine, and that's, I think, what I wanted to show with this extra product here. So Arcanor is not very interesting. Dense Veldspar, that should be good as well. Average price 1750, I would say, is right around its average, but currently selling for 2,200. Not that much more than concentrated Veldspar. Yeah, but a little bit more. So definitely on the higher end here, not bad. Kernite, I think you can grab that as well from HiSec. You can see here again on the lower mineral prices going below average, with a bottom of around 18,700 ISK. Currently 25,000 ISK, lack of availability, and yeah, it's the way to go at the moment, I think, if you want to take advantage of this uptick due to some nullsec conflict. I have some decent stocks myself ready for this. Maybe we'll even check Umber as well. Ooh, Umber is not doing that hot here. 7,500 sellers coming in. Well, 9,400. You know, there is interest in compressed stuff for nullsec. That's just the situation here, which makes this very interesting to me. But yeah, Isogen, we all know what was happening with Isogen. If I quickly go back here, that is very bad news against the trend, right? Again with a one-year low, 38 ISK on average. That's pretty crazy. And so these compressed ores, very interesting to see that even something like compressed Umber is back above average, despite that it's a source for Isogen. Crazy stuff here. Let's see what it's actually going for. 13,000 ISK, it's a premium. People bought this market out. Interesting, interesting. Compressed plagioclase, again, look at that. Going well below average here, November, December, lower mineral prices. Nobody is interested in that. I was compressing everything, almost everything that I was making, bringing it to the market here. And so lower end 6,500, currently selling 8,050 ISK, which is right here. 1 year high price point for compressed plagioclase. So definitely I would say the way to go for your HiSeq mining endeavors. Pyroxeris is another one. Very interesting that to me here, that during November we were at that 1 year low point, 4,900 ISK, but apparently some people were expecting this. Well, actually, Pyroxeris, let's see if what it produces. It produces Mexilon, which I think is the reason why we have this December increase in price already, but currently selling for 7,500 ISK, which is around here on the chart. Look at that. 1 year high point, guys, for compressed Pyroxeris. And if I look at December for Mexilon, yeah, that was this increase in price that was already showing up quite nicely as well in the compressed Pyroxeris market right here. Very interesting. Next up, let's do the rich plagioclase. Again, same thing here. The pattern that it's a source for Mexilon. Yep, exactly. And as a result, you have this increase in price. And if the high end would be 8,000, is currently selling for 7,600. Still having a little bit of trouble here for rich plagioclase, apparently. Interesting that one would be lagging behind. Let's see for the vicious Pyroxeris. Cluster shutdown in 1 hour, no problem. 5,100 currently selling. Well, look at the lack of availability, 6,200. So yeah, compressed HiSeq ores, not bad at all, I would say. Definitely your easiest way to turn your mining efforts in HiSeq directly into ISK at the moment, and to quickly jump on that opportunity that NOSEC creates, because what are they going to jump for first if they want those minerals to increase their fleet sizes, to maybe absorb losses and things like that? It's gonna be this compressed ore market. It's not gonna be the mineral market. So always keep that in mind. I would say in depressed mineral markets, it's always, I think, a better idea to compress rather than to refine. Because you can always refine later at no loss at all if that's what turns out to be the better opportunity. So always, I would say, keep in mind the compressed market will be the first one to move on the NOSEC conflicts, and it's pretty obvious at the moment that the entire economy, it's like this in minerals, so it's like that in Tech 2 ships, probably it's like that in Tech 3 ships. It's NOSEC conflict that is really driving the sell opportunities in the EVE Online market at the moment. That's gonna be it for this week, guys. Hope it helps. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.